So, for part two of Restored, I would like to talk to you about relationships. Of course. When I think about just being restored with relationships, last week we talked about allowing God to heal our broken hearts from all the things that we've suffered. When your heart is once broken, that relationship is messed up. When I think back to just different times in my life where relationships was destroyed, whether it was my fault or their fault or our fault or however you want to put it, I think of the worst relationship in my life that was ever like jacked up and messed up was my relationship with God. Now, you're probably thinking, you probably ain't never had that experience, right? I can be honest enough to say I was angry at God for a very long time, after my first divorce, because I remember feeling like I was trying to find more of God. I wasn't worried about no man, trying to let go of all of the men, and stuff like that. And I can remember, I'm like, God, I was trying to find more of you. And then here comes this man and I get all wrapped up, get married and all of this kind of stuff for it to just end up in divorce. So I felt like I was very angry at God, if I'm going to be honest with you, and I blamed God, right? We have a tendency sometime of doing that because ultimately, God has all power and all control. And that was what I told God in my frustration at that time. I was like, God, you could have shielded me from that. I wasn't even trying to be married. I was content finally with being by myself, trying to get my life together, start my relationship with God, and try to make it to heaven. That was like my ultimate goal, which it still is, but at that moment, so I wasn't worried about being married. And then this man shows up, and like whatever. But so I was so angry at God, rebelled against God, and went through all of that. But I'm so thankful that his mercy kept me through my foolishness, right? Because ultimately, really and truly, yes, God could have stopped it, but he didn't, right? And so we cannot force people to make the right decisions. People or us, all of us, God allows us to make our own decisions. God will not. He's the only gentleman, the greatest gentleman, I should say, that will never force us to do anything that we don't want to do. He don't force a relationship with you. He don't force you to follow his will. He don't force you to pray. He don't force you to read his word. He don't force you to do anything. He allows you to do whatever you want. So for me, when I think back in my life, that was the I would say most painful moment in my life when I had felt like a relationship was broken. And it was when my relationship with God was broken because I was so angry with God. Now, when I look at it in a natural sense, I look at it as far as the divorces, there's even friendships that I'm no longer really friends with certain people for whatever reason. And I had to grieve those relationships. I had to grieve going through divorce, and divorce is never easy for anybody. Even when you want it, it's still not easy. Oh my God. I don't wish it on my worst enemy, period. And honestly, when I look back at a lot of those relationships, whether I was married or friendships or even family members, in those relationships where I needed some of that to be restored. Some of the relationships, I'm so thankful. Like for one, ultimately, the most important one, I'm thankful that God kept me and gave me mercy to keep me here to re-strengthen and restore my relationship with him. But when I think of people in general, in a natural sense, I'm thankful for the relationships that he restored in my life. And I'm thankful for the ones that he restored and didn't rekindle. Because there is times, or I should say there are times, it's a proper way, right? Is that God will restore relationships, but it doesn't necessarily mean that he will rekindle that relationship. So my question to you today would be, have you restored those relationships that needed to be restored and yet still didn't rekindle them? Because that's okay. We don't always, we can forgive people. We can restore those relationships. Restoration comes when forgiveness has flowed through. When you can truly forgive somebody, that relationship is restored. Just because you're not friends with that person, like maybe you used to be, your ace boon coon, something like that we used to say when we was young. It doesn't mean that relationship wasn't restored. It can be restored, but it doesn't mean it has to go back to where it was. Now, when you think of your relationship with God, yeah, if that relationship needs to be restored, it better be greater than ever, right? That's the only relationship that should be restored and be greater than ever. With other people, our relationships can be restored because peace have found us and been in that relationship, but it doesn't necessarily mean they have to be like your best friend again, right? And so that's what we have to remember, that relationships can be restored, but they don't have to be rekindled. Amen? Amen. So I'll leave you with this. Matthew chapter 18, verse 15 and 16. It says, "Moreover, if thy brother shall trespass against thee, go and tell him his fault between thee and him alone. If he shall hear thee, thou hast gained thy brother. But if he will not hear thee, then take with thee one or two more, that in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses every word may be established." So before I go, I just want to remind you, if you haven't already, check out my website at www.talkswithshay.org. You can subscribe to my videos on YouTube and find me on Facebook. Like my page, share my page, invite your friends to like my page. And until next time with Talks with Shay, Shay is out. Y'all stay blessed.